Hello, I am Angela Labella, formerly Lee Trusolino. I was born in Utica, New York, 1929, to Joseph Trusolino and Lucy Trusolino. When I went back to Italy, I was surprised to find out that his name was Giuseppe Trusolini. It stopped at Trusolini, but it was spelled with an I at the end instead of the O, like in America. My mother was not Lucy, but Maria Lucia Montanaro. That was my mother. They lived in southern Italy, which is considered a poor section, but I was there and it's a lovely, lovely section. But 100 years ago or 95 years ago, maybe it was very poor and very rugged. My mother and father both say we came from Bari, from Noci, Bari. However, that's considered like, Noci is like a suburb of Bari. Northern Italy hates southern Italy. Southern Italy hates northern Italy. And there was a king ruling then, believe it or not. Now it's all Italy. So if you're from Italy, my mother and father were both from Noci Bari. My father lived on a farm outside of Noci Bari. My mother lived in the city of Noci Bari. They did not know each other until almost the day they got married. Okay, Grandpa, who was called Peppino. In Italy, you have to name your first son after the father. They said Little Joe, meaning Peppino. So Grandpa was Peppino and his father was Giuseppe. My father decided early in life that he was not going to live on the farm, which was very beautiful and he loved it very much, but there was the rest of the world out there. My father decided, I'm going to America. And it was easy to get into America and they were still able to get in. His family said, no, don't leave us. He had 8 or 9 brothers, I'm not sure which one, and 3 sisters. So there was a big family. They all lived on the farm. And he did. He went to America. He left and said goodbye. They put him in North Virginia, which is the coal mines. Well, my father lived on a farm. He had grapes and olives and all that stuff around him, and he had horses and all, and he wasn't going to live down there inside of a mine. So within a very short time, he hated it. So he decided, I am going to New York City. That's where all the Italians are. Now, if you watch old movies, you'll see Bleecker Street and Hester Street and all the Italians all in Little Italy. And that's where Daddy went. He really didn't like this part of his life. Number one, he hated New York City. It was too much noise, too many people, thousands of people walking in the middle of the street, living in tenements. That was not what he came to America for. Second thing, I don't know how he happened, but maybe he was forced to go into the Army. World War I, American Army. All I know about my father being in the Army was 2 things. We have a picture of him, his riding crop type of pants, high boots. That's what you wore. And then once in a while he would get sick. And my mother would say, the Army did that to him. She didn't have to explain it to us. I don't know what that meant, but he was sick for a while. So anyway, he hated New York City. He wanted to start a family and a business and make money, because that's what he came to America for. So he writes a letter home to Noci Bari and said, I don't like the American women. He said, they're all, I don't want to use the Italian word for it, but he meant fast. Puttane. That's the Italian word. I shouldn't have said that, but that's what he said. So in Italy, they get the letter and they find a woman, a girl for him. He wanted a young girl who was willing and able and ready to come to America. So he goes to Italy, they make a big deal, Giuseppe's back, Peppino is back, blah, 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 blah. They have a big party, and he's introduced to his future bride. Now, I don't know the exact words, and I did go to Italy, and I went right to the same place he was. Almost the same people, but they were all old by that time. So I get there, and everybody told me the same story. He gets there for the party to meet his bride-to-be, and he says, I don't want her. Now, I don't know if he actually said that to the poor woman's face, but everybody understood that he didn't want to marry who they picked. And they said, well, who do you want? And he said, I want that one, and he pointed to my mother. She was an 18-year-old girl. She lived with her old mother. Her mother must have been married in the old age, and her aunt. And her father was in America, and that was another story. But she did live in Bari, and she was a well-known, sweet girl, and very pretty. And she knew how to sew at 18 years old. She made all the clothes for everybody around, and he picked a winner. So she obviously thought the same thing, because by Christmas they were married. It was 1925. My father and my mother got married in Noci Bari. When I went back, when I was 70 years old, I saw the church. It's still standing there. Everybody was so proud that we were there. Everybody was making a fuss over us. And this little old lady, who was obviously older than me, and I was already 70, she said, I was your mother's flower girl. She said, I walked behind her and fixed her train on the floor. And this is where she got married. So somehow, and we saw a lot of people in Italy, and my mother and father never talked about this part, but somehow she broke her mother's heart by leaving, and her mother died. And the story went around that she died of a broken heart. I doubt that. Here's how they came to America. Her father, who was a very handsome man, his name was Joseph Montanaro. He was married 3 times. He was what they would call like a tour guide. His job was, he put together a group of Italians that wanted to move to America, and he brought them there. He led the way, he made it easy for them. So he made trips back and forth. He took his own family from his first wife to America, and they hated it. And they would not stay there, and they went back. Somehow she died, the woman, and he married a second wife. The second wife became my cousins, all my cousins. Everybody that I didn't know until I was older were my mother's half-sisters and brothers, because they were from the second wife. She died, but all his children became my aunt so-and-so, uncle so-and-so, and their children were my cousins, and we were one big happy family. His family was in America. He left all his family in America, and he meets this third wife, which was my mother's mother, and I think she was like an older bride. My mother never talked about it. So he marries her. They get and have Maria Lucia, which was my mother, the only child. So I always called him Grandpa, and he was my grandpa. And he stayed with the second family. He lived with them, thinking that I didn't know they were second families. They were just my mother's sisters and brothers. So my mother, everybody was older than my mother. She was only 18. So everybody's waiting to meet Aunt Lucy, the new aunt that's coming from Italy. They think they're going to see a little woman carrying a bag with raggedy clothes on, maybe, I don't know, but she was going to Ellis Island. So most of the people that went to Ellis Island were poor. But somehow, maybe, I'm just speculating. My mother and father came through Ellis Island with no trouble. My mother never said anybody mistreated her, never said that on the boat she was mistreated. And I assume it's because her father was the tour guide. Well, how else could that happen? Because you hear horrible stories about Ellis Island in 1925.
I mean, all these old buildings here, what were they doing here? I mean, that's where people must have...
No, the ones that didn't pass inspection, well, they had to stay here for a week to 2 weeks to a
Oh
month.
yeah, and they probably waited and then they
had to
shipped them
stay-
back or
they
something.
shipped them back.
Or the stove that was sick.
Show
If
'em.
they get a lot more cheese, where are they going to put them in?
I gotta see this right. Out of the way, quick. Excuse me. Where's the name, man? Say
Lucia Montanaro Trisellino, Giuseppe Trisellino. Right here. Grandpa and Grandma. Take a picture of it. Look, there's no other Trisellinos either. Look.
So anyway, she arrives in New York. And her father takes her to Utica, where his other children all lived. She had on a beautiful, beautiful cloche hat, which in that year was very stylish if you look at old movies. So she walks in the apartment, all the family's there. They're stupefied. Here's this young lady, 18 years old, not looking like them at all. She had lighter eyes, her skin was lighter, her hair. She just didn't look like a Trisellina at all. And she was dressed so beautiful. She had furs on her neck, you know, those animal furs that they wore. She had black stockings on because she was in mourning. In those days, you wore black stockings when you were in mourning for your mother. But everybody was stupefied, and they fell immediately in love with Aunt Lucy. She made each and everything she wore. She made everything I wore until I got married. After she had a bunch of kids, she gave up on that. First of all, they got married and lived happily ever after. That is the best part of the story. They got everything they wanted. They loved America. They wanted a big family, and they had 11 children. 2 passed away, 9 survived. When they came to America, my mother did not like where they were living. The aunts, they were living like in almost like in Little Italy. It was a Little Italy. And my mother, she always said, I'm an American now. And she meant it. I'm an American now. So they did not live in where everybody else lived. And they found a flat of their own. And it happened to be on a business street above a store. Many, many, many buildings in those days had apartments above the store. And everybody on that street had a business. A florist, a jeweler next door, a furniture store. So my mother and father said, well, why can't we have one? And that's what they did. They opened a little store and they sold dry goods. Just dry goods. That meant sheets and, stuff like that. And I recall they went into underwear and corsets. Women wore corsets in those days. All the ideas were my father's. had the bright idea to build a stall and every day put the shoes on the stall outside the door of the store. So he took his little 6 or 7-year-old daughter, me, and put her next to the shoes. And they had a sign on them, shoes $2 or $1 or whatever. So people would come up and say, talk to me as if I was a sales girl, and I was a little sales lady. So I would say, Papa, somebody wants to buy shoes, and he would run out. Well, while I was turning my head one day, someone stole a pair of shoes and ran. They were children's shoes. I could still see it. And my father comes out, he said, where's the customer? I said, Daddy, they just ran down the street with the shoes. So my father says, okay, I learned something. From there on in, there was one shoe outside. The other shoe was inside. So if they were interested in the shoes, they had to go inside, and my father would take care of them inside. My mother and father decided, I don't care what happens, business is for us. And that's what they did. There was another dry goods store on the same street, and he didn't like that. He didn't like it, because there was one of each. And I can still see us when we were kids, when we locked the store at night to go upstairs. Just like in the movies, a man would come down the street and check the doors. You know, he was paid, he was a watchman. He'd come and check all the doors to make sure all the doors up and down the street were locked. But if you were a robber or a burglar, you would go through the back. You knew that he was only checking the front. So one day, our store was robbed. And they took all the merchandise and everything, even though we were upstairs. So it was in the paper, and I had a little ad that it happened. They said, store on Bleecker Street robbed last night, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, my mother says, well, this is for the birds, but she didn't say it in English. She just said in Italian. So she decided that she was going to do the sewing. There was nothing to rob. If they wanted to come in, they'd find a half-finished dress or something like that. There was one other bridal shop in Utica, that's all. And we were a big city then. One other bridal shop. My mother said, well, she's not going to have every bridals that comes in here, and she doesn't make them anyway. She buys them and sells them. So I'm going to have custom-made bridal. So we moved out of that building over the other store, and we moved up the street. And by that time, there was 4 of us. There was no backyard. We played on the fire escapes. So we had fun. This is the 4 of us. And then one day, my mother, who was not a housekeeper and didn't know anything about housekeeping, she was washing clothes. And I said to her, Mama, I'll help you. So in those days, you had wringers. First they washed, and she had the first machine. Then you took them out and you put them through a wringer. And they went in through a tub of cold water. And then you wrang them again. And then you hung them on the line. So I said, I'll help you. She said, okay. So I put the first thing in, and my arm went through the wringer, got stuck in the wringer. And my mother's screaming out this window, and she's screaming, help, help. So people come up and help her, and they showed her how to open the top of the wringer and take my arm out. My mother said, I'm not a housekeeper. I'm a businesswoman, and that's what we're gonna do. My mom, from the first day until the day she died, never stepped foot in a supermarket, never did laundry, never cooked and didn't learn how to cook. The only thing she knew how to make was her boiled eggs in the morning for her breakfast. And she learned one other thing, maybe she I don't know where she learned this, but she knew how to make little handmade macaroni that looked like earrings. She made those. Not another thing. She didn't know how to make stew or sauce or anything. She was a dressmaker, and that's what she was. And she wasn't just a dressmaker, she was a designer, a famous one for our town. But after my hand going through the wash machine, she said never again. So my father did the washing, my father did the wash machine, my father did the floors, my father did the cooking. But that's the way they wanted it. So after they moved out of that apartment, they bought their first building. which was a nice, gigantic building, brick, big high, 3-story building. She decided she was going to have a bridal shop. She put it on the first floor. That was called Charm Bridal Shop. We lived on the second floor, and it was a gigantic apartment. 7 rooms and 2 bathrooms. For those days was big. Most people lived in 1 room. We lived in it until I got married. And I got married at 23 years old. When the photographer came to take my pictures as we're leaving the house, you can plainly see the bridal shop. I'm standing in front of it. And very plainly above the bridal shop is the sign that says, Joseph Trissolino, proprietor. The typical Italian father. He was the proprietor. That's the way it was. But they were happy with that. And because his brains, he knew what to do, and she did it. And they had business after business. They had everything they wanted. They had all the children they wanted. My mother had 2 mink coats, diamond earrings, new furniture, a big house. You name it, they had everything they ever dreamed of. Let me skip ahead and tell you this. When I went back to Italy, and I walked in a room full of all our cousins, all the Trissolines. Not all of them, but as many as could get to, there were so many of them, I don't even want to talk about that. But I walked in, and the first thing I saw was a little old lady sitting in a chair. She was dressed in black from her head, from her neck to her feet. She had white, snow white hair, just like my father had. And she was all bundled, all over like this. And I walked in and I started to cry. And people said, what are you crying about? I said, that's exactly how I saw my father at the end of his life. He looked just like that, all white hair and his head down. And I was crying, and the old lady saw me crying. And she said, what's that old lady crying about? She called me the old lady, but she said it in Italian. And she didn't, I cannot speak Italian, and to this day I can't speak Italian. Because my mother always said, I'm American. But I can understand every word that people say because my mother and father spoke to each other in Italian. But in public, my mother I never heard her talk to other ladies in Italian. So this man was standing next to this little old lady, and he said, Mama, stop, be nice. And she said, I want to know why she's crying. So he said to her, Mama, do you remember Peppino? And she said, yes. And he said, well, who is he? And he said, that's my brother. And he says to his mother, where's Peppino, Mama? She said, oh, he's in America, he's a millionaire. And that was the end. I said, that's what they think. They think he's a millionaire in America. But he wasn't. He was just a man who got all his dreams came true. And all my mother's dreams came true. In Italy, when the father dies, everything belongs to the oldest son. And he's the head of the family. And everything belongs to him. He could do what he wants with it. You could live on his land. You could do anything you want. So they told him that his father and mother were both dead. So he went to Italy. We had a big party when he left. And when he went to Italy, he told them, I don't want anything. I got everything I want in America. And they thought he was God because he turned over the farm. So when we went, or 30 years later, we were very important people because they had everything they wanted left by my father to them. Grandma Trissolino and Jay, my brother, I don't know where they could sing, what do you say, the a cappella without an orchestra? And she loved it. She was a show-off. She loved it. One day we were in a very famous restaurant in Utica, and we went to a party there. And one of my sisters knew the piano player. It was a woman. And they talked. And she said, my mother loves to sing. And the piano player says, well, that's nice. You know, she's, and there was a stage there. So we were going home. We had had our dinner, we had had our party, and we were going home. I said, I'll go gather our coats. I went to the clothing to get my coat. I heard somebody singing. And I said to the cloakwoman, I think that's my mother singing. And she said, oh no, they only have professional singers here. And I said, no, that's my mother singing. I ran back into the big dining room, and there's my mother standing on the stage with her mink coat on, because she would never take her mink coat off for fear somebody would take it out of the cloakroom. So she was standing on the stage with the microphone singing in Italian, and the lady was playing the piano. And I said, oh no, I can't believe this. But that was her first time that she ever had the nerve to get up and do that in public. From there on in, anytime you told her, Lucy, you want to sing us one of your Italian songs? Sure. And she would go on and on and on and on. My husband used to love to do that to her. Mom, yeah, you want to sing an Italian song for us? And she would go on and on and on. She really took it serious.
And you can sing if you want. Want to sing?
She already sang a song.
Che moreggiavo con la mia Gina, che rapita mi fu da un cugino, quell'era un destino avverso per me. Mi svegliai, fui tutto tremante, io con gli occhi di pianto, io dissi così, quella piccina che io tanto l'amai, se mi ingannava io più non l'amo, ma quando vado a casa in congedo, quando mi vede la mamma cara, mi dirà certo di Gina, quella piccina che se ne fa. Mi disse figlio, tu sei tradito, Gina ha preso marito e la non pensa più a te. All'incontrarmi Gina rideva e mi diceva da dove vieni? Io vengo da sul Piave e son ferito e tu mi hai tradito. Io vengo da sul Piave e son ferito e tu mi hai tradito.
Very nice.
Okay, Charm Bridal Shop, my mother was well known, and she had people come from hundreds, really 100 miles. This is World War II going on, to have a wedding gown made. She didn't have them hanging there. They came in and they said, make me a wedding gown. So she would talk to them. They would come back and there would be a full wedding gown made for her, for them. And she did that for years. People just came and said, I want you to make my wedding gown. And in the back room, as she got more and more busy, she had a workroom in the back. And in front of her, she had about 8 or 9 ladies on the machines or with little tables. By that time, she could never do every wedding gown alone. She would miss her deadline. So she would cut them. And she had her own patterns. She didn't have McCall's or anything. She made her own patterns. She would cut the gowns, tell the girls how to sew them, and they would sew them. And then there was a bunch on one side of the room, all they did was hand bead. They did all the hand beading. And all the windows were open. I could still remember, she opened all the windows so the air would come in. And they were it was like a club. They didn't think they were working, they were having fun. Did you ever hear your boss singing? My mother would sing Italian songs all day long, and they were all Italian women. And they loved it. It got to be so popular that obviously they made money. I can still remember being a eighth grader, sitting outside the store. See, people came at night because they had to drive from different cities. We had a stoop on the outside of our building, and I was sitting there watching all these men, and they would be smoking cigarettes and laughing with each other, waiting for their girls to come out of the room, out of the store. Every night it was the same thing. And then after those men and girls left, and my mother got their deposits and everything was settled, then my mother and father says, oh good, the day's over now. And then they went off and visited with all their sisters and brothers. They'd play cards and all that. So then one day my father decided, I'm gonna have a furniture store. And my mother says, okay. So they had a furniture store and they called it Charm House of Furniture. They bought a big building that was dilapidated, 2 doors down from us. There was one little house in between the bridal shop and the new furniture store. The new furniture store had about 5 apartments in it. My father decided down with all of them. He wanted the store to be there. And in between was this little building, and in that building, it was the Italian Red Band. Every night, we had to listen to the Red Band. They called it the Banda Rosa, that means the Red Band, practice. And then every time there was a parade in Utica, that band would be part of the parade. I grew up listening to the Red Band, but the funny part of it was, we had to listen to that band whether we liked it or not. And the landlady that owned the building lived upstairs. She was a little old lady with white hair, mean as hell. And whenever we made noise, and by that time we were 7 kids, she would call the police. If we made noise, she would say, those kids are driving me crazy, those kids are driving me crazy. And we used to say, oh, and we used to stick our tongue out at her. We were very naughty by that time. But the funny part of it is we had to listen to her band whether we liked it or not. Every night. You know what a band is? Boom, 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 and everything. But it was, like I said, it was like that's why it was fun out in front. There was the band playing, there was men laughing and joking, and me and my friends used to sit on the stoop and watch them. My mother and father didn't say, they never told you anything. It was everything was a secret. If my mother was pregnant, you had to make up your own, Ma, is Ma pregnant? She never said anything to you. Never, 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 never. My father never said anything. So I'm in high school. This girl sitting up behind me says, I saw your father last night. I said, yeah. She goes, yeah, he comes in the bakery every night. I said, oh, yeah. And they always say to him, Joe, how many kids have you got now? And he said, I'll make up a figure. I got 7, no, I had 8. I'm going to have another one. And she comes to the school the next day and tells me that. And I says, you're crazy. My mother would have told me. Your father announced to everybody you're having another baby. So that's how I found out my last baby. But anyway, they never told you anything. I was just proving to you that they never told you anything. Everything was between the 2 of them. They decided they wanted to go downtown. So I was married and had 2 children. And there I was, like 23 years old. And they said, okay. They didn't tell me. My father rents a store. And you're going to run it. So I put my 2 kids, Gary and Stephen, in a nursery school. That's all I had at the time. And we opened a shop. And my mother said she wanted to name it... I forgot the name of it, something, not Mademoiselle. And I said, no, Mom, we're going to name it Mademoiselle Bridal Shop. And then next to it, I had a dash where bridal dreams come true. It was just exactly like Mademoiselle had the long, long, long window and a short window in the front. And upstairs was a bingo parlor. So we were there 3 years. In the meantime, my father saw all the business we were making in this shop, without telling me, without telling anybody in the family, except my mother probably, he buys a department store that had closed up and gone out of business. He buys a whole building that was a department store. The same department store that me and my girlfriend used to go in when we were in high school. But I didn't have to buy anything because my mother made everything for me. But the only thing I would buy would be sweaters, you know, and underwear and stuff like that. But my friends bought everything in that store. It was called a Famous Department Store. So without telling us, we own the Famous, right? So he remodels it, and the first thing he does is paint it pink, because in Italy, if you're rich, everything is pink. He puts up Mademoiselle Bridal Shop. I was busy with the other shop because we had a 3-year lease. So Marie, my sister, went in there to start opening the door. Marie calls me up one day. She goes, "Lee, you better get here right away." She says, "I can't keep up with this." She says, "People are pushing their way in the door because they never saw such a big bridal shop." So Papa said, "Let's close the one downtown and we'll bring your mother and all the group over here. Close that one, sell the building, forget about them. They were done with them. And Mama will be at the bridal shop and Marie will be downstairs." And then it was so big that he made a partition right down the middle of it, and he called one side of it Famous Hat Shop. And the other side was the Mademoiselle. Mama did all she could do upstairs, but no longer make one gown like she did, when she was in her own shop. By that time, we were selling ready-made gowns and her gowns. We had to hire more people, more machines, and by that time they weren't all Italian, and it was different. And it went on for close to 50 years. I became the so-called manager, or workhorse, which one do you want to call me?
Owner.
I did everything until I couldn't walk another day, and I quit when I was 68. And that's how we got Mademoiselle.
Hey, Angelina, how about another antipasto? That's a nice. I eat antipasto twice just because she is so nice, Angelina. Angelina, the waitress at the pizzeria. I keep a zooping in the strong just to be with her alone, Angelina. Angelina, the waitress at the pizzeria. What evil you've been in. Angelina, I adore you. Evil you've been in. Angelina, I live for you.
Granddaughter of immigrants. Great granddaughter.
Oh, but Angelina never listens to my song. I eat the cutlet parmesan so that I can gaze upon Angelina. Angelina, the waitress at the pizzeria. If she'll be my cara mia, then I'll join in matrimony with the girl that serves for money. Angelina will be mine. Cutlet parmesan so that I can gaze upon Angelina. Angelina, the waitress at the pizzeria. If she'll be my cara mia, then I'll join in matrimony with the girl that serves for money. And Angelina will be mine.
true immigrant, daughter of an immigrant. Proud of it.
Me, I'm